Hello and welcome to the Ascent Cycling Podcast hosted by myself, Guillaume, and my co-host, Joe Timms. You might know us as Blackwall and Tim Soski. The Ascent Podcast is a brand new media on the cycling scene, and we will be covering the world of professional cycling with race analysis, reviews, interviews, and more. It is a brand new project, which I know Joe is excited about, and so am I, to be honest, and hopefully you guys will be following along with us. Today, we will kick things off with our first ever review, an analysis, and our thoughts on La Vuelta a España 2020. But first, I think we should talk a little more about who we are, how this podcast came together, and have you guys know a bit more about us.
Yes, welcome to the Ascent Cycling Podcast. You may know both myself and Guillaume from YouTube, where we have both posted a range of content based around cycling and Pro Cycling Manager, but we have really taken a greater interest recently in podcasting. We have collaborated with one another on our individual podcasts previously, and hence the Ascent Cycling Podcast was born. The cycling season, of course, has just come to an end with La Vuelta a España, but we have a bunch of exciting content planned for you guys over the winter months, so hopefully you're looking forward to that. At the moment though, the podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and very shortly will be on Apple Podcasts too, as well as a host of additional platforms. You can also follow the podcast over on Twitter. The link will be in the description and in the show notes.
But as we've mentioned in the introduction, today's first ever episode of the Ascent Cycling Podcast will be about the Vuelta, the final Grand Tour of the season that ended on this Sunday, 8th of November. A Vuelta won by none other than the Slovenian Primož Roglič ahead of Richard Carapaz, and a bookie surprise in Hugh Carthy. We'll go more in detail into some of the stages, but first we'll talk about the GC. A GC with the likes of Valverde, Felix Großschartner, David Gaudu, David de la Cruz, Wout Poels, Enric Mas, Dan Martin, and as I said, the podium of Carthy, Carapaz and Roglič. What do you make of this top 10, Joe?
I think Roglič and Carapaz were probably the two big favourites coming in, so no real surprise to see them finish on the podium in Madrid. The definite surprise, as you mentioned, though, was Hugh Carthy finishing in third right there. What a performance. He was right there too, really challenging the two big favourites, Roglič and Carapaz, right through the race, obviously winning on the Angliru too. I think Dan Martin can be happy with his top five. Maybe Enric Mas slightly disappointed with his fifth place position. But yeah, in the end, really great battle between Primož Roglič and Richard Carapaz. And it was pleasant to see Roglič come out on top after missing out on the Tour de France in such heartbreaking fashion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Jumbo-Visma. I do like Roglič. He's had an incredible season, missing out in a very dramatic fashion on the win of the Tour de France, then winning Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And for him to win La Vuelta is a nice way to end the season and to end a 2020 season, which was rather special compared to the others for reasons that we all know. Richard Carapaz maybe had the legs to go and get that GC win. I mean, he loses the GC by 24 seconds. I don't have the number in my head, but I'm pretty sure Primož Roglič gained more than like 40 seconds just on bonus time, on bonus seconds. So maybe some disappointment, some regrets from Richard Carapaz. And yeah, Hugh Carthy in third place, absolutely massive performance from the British rider of EF, who came here as the third leader, I'd suggest, of EF behind Michael Woods and Dan Martinez. Obviously, Dan Martinez withdrawing very early on in the race, and Michael Woods losing any hope of the GC after a crash in the first stage. Yeah, what a performance from Hugh Carthy, winning at the Angliru, being the first ever Brit to win at the Angliru as well, after having riders such as Christopher Froome climbing it. So yeah, absolutely massive. Dan Martin in fourth place for his potentially final year as a leader of the Grand Tour, as we'll have Chris Froome joining Israel next year. Enric Mas, you've said in fifth place. I do agree with you. I think he can be somewhat disappointed. And then we'll have a huge gap to sixth place onwards with Wout Poels, David de la Cruz, David Gaudu coming in at eighth place. Very nice end of the Vuelta for David Gaudu, who technically might have been the teammate of Thibaut Pinot at the start, lost a few seconds here and there, but with a huge stage 17, he's managed to enter the top 10. Großschartner in ninth, very nice job from Bora Hansgrohe. And finally, to round up the top 10 for 2 little seconds is the departing Alejandro Valverde. I mean, he still is incredible. The man is 40 and he top 10s the Grand Tour.
It's pretty special what he continues to do every year. I think we have maybe seen a slight step back from him this year. Not quite performing as he has done in previous seasons. He's been so dominant, really well into his 30s. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first season since, I think, the early 2000s where he hasn't won a stage or won a race throughout the entire season. So maybe we are finally starting to see Valverde's age show somewhat. I think it is his 20th top 10 at a Grand Tour, which is just an incredible achievement, that is for sure. 20 top 10s in Grand Tours, and of course winning the Vuelta a España on the single occasion.
I mean, yeah, you've said it all regarding Valverde. He basically nearly top 10'd the Tour de France as well. So for a man in his 40s to nearly top 10 2 Grand Tours with very short intervals between the two of them is just absolutely incredible. It's a performance that people might have glanced over, but it genuinely is incredible. Just ahead of Vlasov, who lost a lot of times in the first stage, I think, and he'll kick himself for that because that was the top 10. Then George Bennett, Mikel Nieve, Guillaume Martin in 14th place, who we'll talk about because he did win the mountain classification. Sergio Nao, Sepkus, Mattia Cataneo for Deceuninck, not having the same luck as they had on Giro. Marc Soler, Gorka Izagirre, and Gino Meda for the final ever Grand Tour of NTT. An NTT team that did quite well, in my opinion, on this Vuelta.
Yeah, they definitely did. And I think the emergence of Gino Mada was probably the highlight for them. I don't think they took any stage wins, unless I'm mistaken. But Mada, stage 17, he came second, beaten pretty comprehensively by Godzu. But Mada potentially showing himself as a future stage racer and, I mean, maybe a challenger in the future Grand Tours because he's still just 23 years old. So yeah, I think really the main highlight for NTT was Mada's promise shown at this race.
I agree. I don't think he has a contract for next year as well, the young Swiss. But I wouldn't be surprised if a team were to get him in the next few days, especially with the performances he's had mainly on stage 17 at the Alto de la Covatilla. But yeah, a huge race from Gino Meda. But we're now going to delve maybe a bit more into some of the stages. One thing I have to mention, though, GC-wise, which surprised me, you might be able to help me there. Do you ever remember seeing a Grand Tour with only 2 riders wearing the leader's jersey?
It's a great question, and a question I can't answer. Obviously, it's rare for the eventual winner to take the winner's jersey so early. Roglič took it on the first stage. He did lose it, of course, to Carapaz throughout the race, I think a few times. But yeah, I can't remember an occasion where we only had 2 riders in reds. Can you?
Don't think so. I mean, on the Vuelta, I can't. I think there might have been one occasion on the Tour de France. At least, I mean, the last one I can remember, I think, I could be wrong. It was when Bradley Wiggins won it. So that is 2012, I think. I could be wrong again. Like in the comments, maybe people can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think Fabian Cancellara had taken the jersey on day 1, and he lost it to Wiggins, who then went on to win the Tour de France. But that nearly was a decade ago. So yeah, it's quite odd, especially when the race doesn't start with a time trial. But yeah, Primož Roglič losing the jersey twice, I believe, and bringing it home in Madrid. A little scare, I guess, on stage 17. But he can thank Movistar, who did a nice job of bringing him back on Carapaz. Maybe some salt from the Spanish established team, which was their former leader in Carapaz.
Exactly. It has to be the big talking point coming out of the final week of the race. Carapaz attacking Primož Roglič on the Covatilla with 3k to go in the Vuelta, and Movistar, other team to help Primož Roglič bring back in Richard Carapaz. Obviously, they're going to say they were pacing for Enric Mas to try and gain that 4th place from Dan Martin. I don't think that was ever really on, to be honest with you. However, whether they intended to disadvantage Carapaz at all and help Primož Roglič, I don't think it matters too much in the end, because I think Primož Roglič would have had this one in hand anyway. He may have gained 5 seconds 10 seconds at a max, and he won by 24 seconds in the end. So I don't think Movistar pacing really was the reason that Carapaz lost this race.
Yeah, I do agree. I don't think he would have lost the jersey. I think he was in his climb. Sure, he was not as good as a Carapaz, but he was good enough to retain his jersey. And with all the bonus seconds he took, he was fortunate enough to bring the red in Madrid. One of the other talking points I'd have is regarding the parcours of the race. We only had, I believe, 3 sprint stages, a final week, which I don't know what to make of it, because there was no, I mean, we had La Covatia, sure, on a Saturday, but for the rest of the time, there was no real GC stage in the final week, and I feel like that was a bit disappointing.
It's an interesting point for sure, because when we take a closer look at stage 15, for example, we had plenty of climbs scattered throughout the stage and throughout the other stages really in that final week. But stage 15 in the end was won by Jasper Philipsen ahead of Pascal Ackermann. I think Sam Bennett was dropped, but those two guys still there right at the front of the race in the bunch sprint. But we did have over 4,000 meters of climbing throughout the day, over 200 kilometers. So clearly a difficult stage, but we did have a long descent flat section into the finish, which really prevented those GC attacks from taking place. I think this comes down to whether the organisers intended for the race to be ridden like this. Perhaps they intended for a lot of the GC to be decided early on, and then perhaps trying to force some creative and inventive strategies and tactics in that final week to try and force some differences. But obviously that didn't really take place, with the only GC day really being the Covatia on stage 17.
I agree. And speaking of tactics, one team surprised me with their tactics during the final week. First, we've had Ineos on stage 16, ending in a very heartbreaking manner. The escapee of Rémi Cavagna, who nearly pulled an absolute masterclass. But Ineos caught him up just to allow Primož Roglič to finish second. So, yes, that was very odd. And also, on the Alto de la Covatia, an absolute monster ride from Ide Schelling, the teammate of Großschartner, pacing on La Covatia on his own for like 6-7 kilometers with no purpose, just to keep the 7th place of Großschartner, which it did not keep.
Yeah, some puzzling decisions. I think they needed Schelling to come to the front earlier on, because Movistar put the gap down to around a minute, just over a minute. And then, of course, Soler attacked. And by the foot of the Covatia, I think the gap was over 3 minutes, almost 4 minutes to the breakaway. So really, Bora needed some tempo there to help Großschartner out. But yeah, some puzzling decisions for sure. And going back to the Cavagna attack and the Ineos pacing, that was very puzzling. Very, very puzzling, because they've had limited domestiques throughout the race, really. Froome has struggled. Ivan Sosa has struggled too. So using up a lot of domestiques really for no apparent reason on that stage was puzzling to me for sure. And I was rooting for Cavagna so badly in that stage. What a rider. He has so much power. Just to hold off the peloton for as long as he did was pretty special. And yeah, he was brought in for real, no apparent reason.
I think everyone was rooting for Cavagna that day. Just a monster ride from a rider that should not even have been on this Vuelta. He replaced Zdenek Štibar, I believe, 2 or 3 days before the start of the race. And yeah, I mean, he was on the highest possible gear, and I felt like he needed one more. That's how powerful he was. Like, there was, I think it was it Movistar that led the chase behind him? I think it was Movistar. And there was 5 riders of Movistar relaying each other, yet losing time and losing ground on a lone Rémi Cavagna. Just absolutely stupendous ride, and it's a big shame that he couldn't go to the end. But yeah, an odd race from Ineos. You said that Chris Froome and Sousa went in the greatest of shapes. We saw Chris being below average, we'll say, on the first stages. I have never seen Ivan Sousa across the entire race. I have no idea what he did. I did not even know he was there. And I know that because I have a playthrough with Ineos. I did not see Ivan Souza during this race.
A very disappointing race from Sosa, it has to be said. I mean, on paper, he should have been right there with Carapaz, probably after Amador, because he's won some good races in South America, beating guys like Carapaz, Lopez, and really competing with them. And I'm not sure what it is. He's had a few Grand Tours now. I think he went to the Giro last year, and he really struggled there too. He seems to really struggle just throughout the 3-week races. That's something for him to work on. He's still just 23, so we have to take that into account. He's only human. We can only ask so much of him. But yeah, Sosa really has showed a lot of promise, and hopefully he can improve in the Grand Tours because he has the potential, I think. So yeah, we'll see what he can do going forwards.
Yeah, it's quite rare, especially for a rider from Ineos to struggle on Grand Tours. I had him in my favorites to challenge, at least for the white jersey. And yeah, just a big question mark on Sousa's abilities on a 3-week race. But in an era where all the GC winners are now very young, I mean Pogačar on the Tour de France, Tao Geoghegan, his teammate on the Giro, he needs to make sure that he doesn't miss the cut. Otherwise, Sousa's career might take a turn quite soon.
Yeah, definitely, especially as Ineos are so Grand Tour focused. Yeah, we'll see what he can do. I expect he'll probably start the season well next year, depending where the season starts, because we know we're not going to Australia as we would usually for the Tour Down Under. But yeah, we'll see what Sosa can do next year. Going back to Froome though, very disappointing for Froome. I think people had limited expectations of him coming in. He said he wasn't going to ride the GC beforehand, and he was riding in support of Carapaz. But looking at his results, he didn't finish inside the top 50 on a single stage at this race. Just showing, I guess, how much he struggles. I expected him to improve a little bit in the final week, in the final stages, because we know how good he can be in the final weeks. But yeah, he just struggled so much throughout the race, and I really hope he can at least regain some of the form and some of the fitness, I guess, that he's had in the past going to Israel next year. What do you think? Can Froome improve? Can he get back anywhere near his previous level next year?
I've always been a massive fan of Chris Froome ever since, was it 2012 and the Wiggins Froome Tour de France, I guess. I've always been a fan of Chris. It's heartbreaking to see him like that. It really is, because I knew he wasn't going to challenge for the GC. However, there was a part of me that still believed in him, and that was like, maybe he's just saying he's not going to challenge, but I mean, we know that Ineos are a team that can bluff. Chris Froome can bluff. Comes the first stage, and I see him being dropped in the penultimate climb. I'm like, so he wasn't bluffing. Maybe he'll pick up the form in the final week. Maybe he'll go for the mountain classification. Maybe he'll go for the stage win on the Angliru. He didn't. He's never been there. I think the most I've seen of Chris was on the time trial, because he spent the entire climb of the Mirador de Zaro with Koen de Kort. It was just sad. I was sad because I love Chris Froome, and I hope, I said on Twitter earlier today, I genuinely hope he can go back to his level, or at least close to his level with Israel. I have little hope that it will happen, but I'd love it so much if he could come back. I love Chris Froome. I genuinely do. I love this man, and it was just very sad to see him struggle like this.
It was sad. We'll see what he can do next year at Israel. I mean, it's going to be a fun team. They have Dan Martin. Is Dan Martin going to be asked to work for Froome after this race? I can't imagine so. So we'll see how those guys get on. Hopefully Froome can take the time, I guess, in the off-season just to get back somewhat to maybe not Grand Tour winning, but maybe riding a GC race. That's what I'd like to see. If Froome can ride a GC race at a Grand Tour and stay somewhat in contention with the main GC guys, I think that's what we can hope to see from Froome, because based on what we've seen at this race, I'm just not sure he can win another Grand Tour. I think that would be fair to say.
I was looking at the roster for Israel next year. They have a roster extremely axed for the Barudas. Like, they're gonna have the likes of Demarchi, Carl Fredrik Hagen, Michael Woods, Ben Hermans, Chris Nielens, Dan Martin, and Chris Froome, I have no idea what the hierarchy in this team is going to be. Because Mike Woods could ask potentially to challenge for a GC. You never know. He's had a decent Vuelta. Dan Martin has had a decent Vuelta. Chris Froome did not have a decent Vuelta, but it's Chris Froome. I do not know what's going to happen. We're always talking about like the Ineos dilemmas for leaders. But this one here, it's a really odd one because Carl Fredrik Hagen can also say, yeah, I did the top 10 once.
Yeah, it's a intriguing team, that's for sure. Very interesting team because we don't know what they're going to focus on. I think really at the moment their one GC leader you could say is Dan Martin, and even he is perhaps more, despite his good performance at this race, he's maybe more suited to the one-day races. Mike Woods, you could say too, who's joining their team next year. So I think Froome definitely will be given the freedom to ride a GC race at a Grand Tour if he chooses to. I think that probably would have been part of the deal with him joining the team there. Otherwise, I can't imagine he'd have gone to Israel. Limited mountain domestiques, that's for sure. I think he'll still get his chances, definitely, even considering his performance at the Vuelta this year.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so, because, I mean, it's Chris Froome nonetheless. Like, he's a superstar in the world of cycling, and seeing him as a domestique did not please me whatsoever.
No, I certainly agree. Anyhow, I'm going to go back to the bonus seconds conversation because you mentioned it earlier. Roglič gained 48 bonus seconds throughout the race. 48 bonus seconds. That's almost a minute just in bonus seconds at the line. Whilst Carapaz, I think he gained 16 seconds. So that would have swung the GC, as you mentioned earlier, in Carapaz's favour. So we've had a rider finishing in less time and not winning the GC. What's your opinion on bonus seconds? Because historically, it's always been the rider with the fewest time, the shortest time throughout the race, winning the GC. And it just seems slightly strange that that isn't happening right now with the bonus seconds. Do you like the bonus second system?
I know at one point, I think the Tour de France had removed them from, I believe, 2011 to a year which I cannot remember. And they introduced it back. I think having bonus seconds is a good way to motivate a rider. Obviously, there's the unwritten rule on the last stage that you don't attack, but Vlasov could have entered the top 10 of the GC today had he gone for the intermediate sprint to get the 3 seconds. I think it's a good incentive to get bonus seconds so that you can increase your position some on the GC. I think I also like what the Tour de France did with the bonus time on certain climbs. That was a very nice add as well. And I think it's probably like the first time we have a rider that finishes in less time at another one, but yet doesn't win it because of bonus seconds. I don't know what to make of it. I think it all comes down to Ineos not fighting the same way as Jumbo. I think Jumbo was like always there for the stage wins. Roglič is a more suited rider for sprint finishes, I guess, than the Carapaz. I think Roglič has 3 stage wins on this Vuelta, maybe a bit more actually, maybe 4 stage wins.
I think it was 4, yeah.
Yeah, but one is a time trial, so like he's taken 30 seconds solely on wins, and then he's got a few podiums here and there. There's a part of me that's saying that it's sad to see someone winning thanks to bonus seconds, but at the end of the day, the rule is there. And you better make the most of it. And that's what Roglič did. I mean, we had basically a similar discussion with Joe Almeida on the Giro because he had like taken a lot of bonus seconds to try and anticipate maybe a tough day on the Stelvio. Well, he had a very tough day that day. But had he won the GC thanks to bonus seconds, we probably would have had the same conversation there. I'd say it's Ineos' fault. Well, not their fault necessarily, but it's Jumbo that did well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like the bonus second system. It is slightly odd that the rider is winning the GC overall despite finishing in a longer time, but the bonus seconds are there. They reward aggressive riders with a good sprint, and Roglič is better than almost any other GC rider in the world, bar maybe Tadej Pogačar. So I think he should be rewarded for that. So yeah, I'm definitely in favour of the bonus seconds system. And Roglič, a very good sprinter. I think he had 3 second places as well as his 4 stage wins. So that's how he's got to that 48 second total, just an incredible, well-rounded rider to be as good as he is in the mountains. And yeah, I think the bonus seconds really reward that.
One of the other teams that came in in this Vuelta with some ambitions was the Groupama FDJ team, which still had Thibaut Pinot at the very beginning. Thibaut, who had withdrawn from the Tour de France and came here. We didn't really know how. On paper, he was the leader, but there was talks that he was going to be the teammate of David Gaudu. And it turns out he withdrew very early on. David Gaudu with a very nice race, including 2 stage wins, carrying on with the trends of Frenchies getting 2 wins. We had Barguil a few years ago. We had Thibaut Pinot a few years ago. But I think there was one rider that surprised you a bit more than David Gaudu in this Groupama FDJ team, Joe.
There certainly was. That man is Bruno Armorai, a great rider, such a great rider. He's 26 years old and he's, I think, according to Pro Cycling Stats, 1m90, 74 kilograms. But this man is so well-rounded. If any of you guys follow me on Twitter, you will have seen towards the beginning of the race, I was watching this guy closely because in the first 11 stages, he finished in the top 50 in all of those stages. And this happens regularly at a Grand Tour, but almost only with the GC riders. This man is a pure domestique. He is riding in the service of Gaudu, basically, for the entire race he was after Pinot withdrew from the race early on. For example, I think it was the stage Gaudu won, was it stage 11? Armorai was pulling all day in the breakaway, trying to give Gaudu that gap, staying with him, and then continuing to finish in the top 50. And he did this day after day until I think stage 12, where he was 56th, and he missed out on the top 50 a few times after that. But I was really impressed with this man. He also finished in the top 5 in the individual time trial. And yeah, I would love to see Bruno given a few more chances to ride for himself next year, because he's clearly very strong. I think on the stage, Cavagna was reeled in late on. I think Armorai tried a late attack on that stage too. He was brought in though by the sprint trains. But yeah, really impressed with this man.
I hadn't noticed his performances until you actually tweeted about it. Well, right. And you said that he was in the breakaway, the stage Gaudu won. He was actually in both breakaways on the 2 stages that David won, was stage 11 and stage 17. And yeah, as well, a top 5 on the time trial. Not to mention, he actually got 3rd on the time trial in France as well, behind Cavagna, and I can't remember who was 2nd. But some decent performances the entire season, actually, because even on the Down Under, I was just scrolling through Pro Cycling Stats. He finished 4th on the Willinger Hill. And that's not something I knew, nor that I expected from Bruno Armorai. But yeah, he's 26 years old. He's got a bright future ahead of him. Maybe not as a GC leader, but if he could see a few opportunities, maybe like Rémi Cavagna, a level below, I guess, the rider from the Koninck. What a race by Bruno Armorai, and what a race from FDJ as well.
I also want to point out another French rider that actually really impressed me on the race too, and he rides for AG2R, and he goes by the name of Dorian Godon. A really good performance by him too. A very similar rider, I would say, to Armorai, because he's very tall. He's quite heavy compared to some of the lighter climbers for sure, but he can get over the climbs very capably. I think he had a few top 10s in the final stages. I think the stage that Philipsen won, he was right there in the sprint. He's quite a good sprinter too. Another really well-rounded rider. And Godon, I think we knew a bit more about coming into the race because he did win, was it Paris-Camembert, I think, coming into La Vuelta in September. But Godon, another rider who really impressed me. And Godon and Armorai, I think, could be quite the force going forwards in French cycling. I'm very excited to see what these guys can become.
I think, they blend in well in the current trend of cycling. Very powerful riders that can go basically on every terrain. You've mentioned Dorian Godon. I will talk about Clément Champoussin, who was giving his first ever chance as a GC leader. He's had some decent performances on some stages. I think he got a top 10 on the Alto de Moncalvio. I can't remember which position, but I might have been 10th actually. He is very young. He's 22. He was still a trainee a couple of years ago, but he did ride very oddly at one point. I think Age de Desert, their tactics were not on point. They were extremely unlucky. We'll have to say that, because they lost 3 riders on the first day. or like the first 2 days, which isn't usually something that happens. But they tried to basically ride as if they were fighting for GC, and I think that might have hindered their chances of getting a stage win. But Champoussin, Dorian Godon, Nance Peters as well, who had won a stage on the Tour de France, they all came in quite close to winning a stage on the Vuelta, and that was nice to see. And we're going to continue on the Frenchies with another French team and another French rider, Guillaume Martin. What a ride! What a ride! The man basically sealed the mountain classifications with like 4 days left. He's at 100 points. Second place is Tim Wellens with 34.
He was pretty impressive, it has to be said. He, I think, went all in for the KOM jersey very early on in the race, which I guess helped secure him the jersey, which also I think hindered his chances in grabbing a stage win, because he did look quite laboured at times because he was going up the roads so consistently, so aggressively every single day where there were any mountain points available. But of course, coming off the Tour de France as well, really nice ride by Guillaume Martin of Cofidis.
I mean, yeah, we had talked about him when we debriefed our Tour de France. He finished 11th of the GC there. I think he basically knew that winning a Grand Tour would be impossible. And Cofidis has a history of having stage wins on La Vuelta. They have the pedigree. I mean, they did have David Moncoutier, who won countless stages, and also, I mean, a lot of mountain jersey. I think Nicolas Edet was one of the riders that also won a mountain jersey for Cofidis in the years after David Moncoutier. So it was nice to see yet another rider from Cofidis, another French rider, getting this jersey. But yeah, sadly, he didn't get that stage win. He finished just behind Tim Wellens on stage 5. He's got like a few top 10s. It's a shame. I would have loved to see Guillaume Martin winning a stage. He would have deserved it, but it just wasn't meant to be for the leader of Cofidis, who I'm absolutely certain we'll see in the next few years trying to get that maiden Grand Tour win.
Definitely. I hope he can get it, and I definitely think he will be able to get it. So staying on the topic of French riders, let's go to FDJ. Gaudu, Thibaut Pinot. Gaudu has shown what he can do this year at the Vuelta. 2 stage wins, and he got stronger as the race went on too. I think he lost quite a bit of time early on. I think on the first stage, actually, he lost 4 minutes or 5 minutes to Roglič and a few other GC guys. But Gaudu was so strong in some of those breakaways. On stage 17, he just destroyed everyone in that breakaway. He was so good on that final climb. I would love to see Gaudu given the opportunity to ride for GC. I think coming into this race, they actually mentioned he may try and go for GC, but he did lose that time earlier on. But yeah, I'd love to see Gaudu try GCs more often, and he's so often working for Thibaut Pinot as a super domestique, or he has been so far in his young career. Do you think it's time for FDJ to change their strategy with these guys? Because Gaudu is improving every year. Pinot's has, of course, a nightmare season, I think it would be fair to call it. How are these guys going to approach next season?
Well, I'm going to be extremely honest. I don't think that FDJ will change something on their leadership. I think Thibaut Pinot is the rider, and then there's riders around him. What I could have an issue with, or not an issue, but I could have a doubt with, is going to be for the Tour de France next year, because we've had Arnaud Démare on the Giro being an absolute monster of a sprinter, and I mean, he's French. He most likely wants to go for the Tour de France and go grab that green jersey. If you already have Démare, you're going to need like 2 guys with him, and if you want to go for the GC as well, you're going to need Pinot, a few riders around. That leaves, in my opinion, a 3-element card to David Gaudu on either of the 2 other Grand Tours, whether they are the Giro or the Vuelta. I think the mountain is not where FDJ usually has the best of riders. They have riders that can climb. They have Gaudu, they have Valentin Madouas, I believe they have Attila Valter for next year. They have the likes of Mollard, Reichenbach, but they're not top riders. And I think David can genuinely try to go for a GC, maybe not winning it. I do believe that the top 5 could be in his bag should the race condition suit him. If there's too many time trials, then I think he's done.
To be honest, I probably agree with you because FDJ, Marc Madiot, they love Thibaut Pinot. They are all in for Thibaut Pinot, it seems to me, at least from the outside looking in. And I just wonder now Gaudu has got those first Grand Tour stage wins in the bag. Of course, winning his first 2 Grand Tour stage wins at the Vuelta, whether he might be more inclined to go for GC, because he can continue to ride like this and just pick up stage wins and stage victories in a variety of Grand Tours, I'm sure, going forward, because he is just so strong compared to the rest of the guys going up breakaways usually. And you mentioned his time trial too. I thought that was a big kind of stumbling block for him when going for the GC, but he did finish in the top 30 of the time trial at this race, which of course isn't great, but I think it's a step for him to improve that real weakness of the time trial. He finished 1 second behind Valverde. I think it was 2 minutes 28 down on Roglič in the end. Of course, it's still a lot of time, but it's an improvement on what he's done in the past.
I mean, sure, it is an improvement, but it's still 2.5 minutes. And I think the closest rider if I think of Gaudu's GC and TT, the one rider that jumps in my head would be someone like Purito, that is strong when the road goes upwards, but as soon as you put him on a time trial bike, he's finished. And 2.5 minutes is a lot. It's a lot. You don't often come back off 2.5 minutes on someone who's basically the favorite to win a Grand Tour. I mean, that's basically one of the reasons as to why Carapaz lost the Vuelta, and Carapaz basically put 2 minutes on Gaudu as well. So I think he needs to improve a lot. I think FDJ as a whole needs to improve on the in the time trial element. They were rumored to get Victor Campenaerts for next year. I don't know if that's still in the books, but if it is, he could be a crucial element to try and improve both Thibaut's and David's abilities when it comes to the solo effort.
I completely agree. Anyhow, let's go and look at the front of the race, because we haven't spoken a lot about Roglič and Carapaz. And I mean, Primož Roglič, he got a lot of stick, I think, after the Tour de France for bottling it, for losing it in the final time trial. I'm just going to read out a tweet I saw earlier. I think it's from Café Roubaix. Primož Roglic's last 13 stage races that he finished, the results were first, fourth, third, first, second, and first. I mean, this man, is he human? Because he is so consistent. I know he sometimes has the stigma attached to him that he fades in 3 weeks in the final weeks of stage races, which we maybe did see a little bit at the Vuelta again, but he is just so strong throughout so many stages throughout the entire season. We've got to give this man some more credit, I think. He is so good. He is just so dominant.
I think a lot of people were happy to see Pogačar win the Tour de France. I think Roglic's performance was he got a lot of stick for it, and to see him nearly bottling it again on stage 17 of this Vuelta, I think a lot of people maybe thought that his demons will come and haunt him again and he would bottle it again. But you've mentioned his track record over the past, was it the 13 last stage races? Yeah, that's a good question. Is he human? Genuinely. It's incredible. It's incredible. He is, for me, the best rider of 2020. I know Benji did a poll. It was between him, Van Aert, and 2 other guys. I know Van Aert has won it. In my opinion, Roglič is the rider of 2020. And in the last 13 stage races, that doesn't even include his win on Liège-Bastogne-Liège, which is not a race I expected him to win at all.
No, although I do think he did get some help there, didn't he, from Julian Alaphilippe?
Fully.
Because I think Hershey would have beaten them all in the sprint. But anyhow, he did win Liège. He was there in the World Championships, top 10. He was right there in the front group, obviously bar Julian Alaphilippe, but he was right there, Roglič as well in the World Championships. He is so consistent, and he's now 31. He can definitely go on and challenge for Grand Tours for the next couple of years at least, and he is so difficult to beat.
I don't know what to make of it, because he came in very late on the scene as well. I think he joined Jumbo in 2016. I think when he joined, he probably wasn't considered to be a GT guy. Let's not forget, this man used to ski jump And now he's destroying Grand Tours everywhere. What a ride! What a ride! And I mean, sure, Roglic is strong, but we do have to give a lot of shout to his team, Jumbo, who have been as well very strong. One rider, in my opinion, that surprised me was Jonas Vingegaard. I I mean, I knew about him coming into this race. I had seen him mainly on the Tour of Pologne. I think it was it last year, but this year he stepped up to another level. Basically, like a Sepp Kuss on the Tour de France, who just became an absolute beast, and no one really expected it. Jonas Vingegaard was this rider. He dropped George Bennett quite a few times on basically every single climb. Just that team: Roglic, Gesink, Kuss, Bennett, Vingegaard. I think there was Hofstede. I can't remember the two other guys that were with Jumbo Visma. I think Paul Martins might have been one of them, but oh, Tom Dumoulin. Tom Dumoulin was the other rider from Jumbo Visma. I've completely lost my mind. Oh, imagine if that team had Tom Dumoulin as well till the end. Like it would have been too easy for Roglic to win. So it's a good thing that Dumoulin withdrew. But compared to Ineos' squad, we've talked briefly about Froome and Sousa. Ineos' team was not good, in my opinion. Sure, you have Carapaz, right? That's very good. But you have a weakened Chris Froome, and even the Sousa that disappeared. I think they had Brandon Smith Rivera, but I'm pretty convinced he withdrew along the way. Michal Golas, Van Barle, Amado, they did the work for Carapaz. And I think there was one more guy. Was it Cameron? Yeah, it was Cameron Worth. It's not a team that you'd expect to win a GC. That's taken into consideration that Chris Froome and Sousa were not there. Carapaz had two teammates in Amado and Van Barle. Roglic had an entire team around him.
Ineos, I think, have done Carapaz no favours at this race. Carapaz was so strong, and it could well have made the difference had he had a really strong team. That's not lie. They have the riders. They didn't go to this race. I think obviously they focused on the Tour de France with Bernal ending his season early. Geraint Thomas, of course, focusing on the Giro, which we know that ended unfortunately for him. They had Dennis, Ganna, Geoghegan Hart at the Giro. We don't need to go through their entire team because we know they are pretty stacked with strong GC riders. But the guys who went to this race definitely didn't perform for Carapaz. And 24 seconds somewhere along the line, that could have been made up with a super strong team helping out Carapaz, I'm sure. Carapaz was by himself, I think, for the final 50k of the final GC day, stage 17. He was completely isolated for the entire finale of the GC, and he still took the challenge to Roglic in the end. So yeah, hats off to Carapaz. Really put up the fight, but done no favours by his own team.
If you come back to that final GC day, I can't remember the entire breakaway, but I know Jumbo had Hofstede. If Ineos had someone strong enough to go in that breakaway and then help out Carapaz when he attacked, that could have been the main difference. That could have been those 24 seconds. I mean, sure, I didn't count on Movistar at that point, but the 24 seconds could have been made there. And you've put it very nicely that Carapaz was strong, but his team did him no favors. Absolutely. Carapaz left Movistar to go to a team with good tactics. Sadly, this just wasn't it from Ineos this year. I, on my own, want to talk a bit more about Hugh Carthy. Because, as I said at the very beginning, he came in my opinion, as the third wheel, I guess, of EF behind Dan Martinez and Michael Woods. And the man stepped up, genuinely stepped up to get a podium finish on the Vuelta. I don't know what the odds were for Hugh Carthy at the start, but they probably were the same as like Jay Hindley's chances of getting a podium on the Giro.
Yeah, no, that'd have been big. That's for sure. I'm not sure what they were, but that'd have been big. Hugh Carthy, what a performance. 26 years old. He got the win on the Angliru too, his first Grand Tour stage win, unless I'm horrendously mistaken right there. Really haven't seen too much of him prior to this race. I mean, looking at his Palmares now, I know he went to the Giro last year and he was quite impressive. He went in a few breakaways and rose pretty strongly with the GC guys for a lot of the race, but certainly we've never seen this level from Hugh Carthy. So really, again, it's intriguing to see whether EF will put him straight into that GC leading role next year at the Vuelta, Giro, even the Tour, who knows, with Danny Martinez leaving, remember. So Hugh Carthy, has he really catapulted himself into a Grand Tour, a consistent Grand Tour leading position?
I think he's done what it takes. You've said Dan Martinez is leaving. Michael Woods is also leaving them. They'll have Rigoberto Urán and Hugh Carthy. I think he's done enough to earn a shot at a leadership position on the Grand Tour. You said that you hadn't seen much of him until this race. I think the main stage I remember from Hugh Carthy was on the Tour de Suisse, where he attacked on his own at the very start of a stage. I think it was like a 120k stage on the Tour de Suisse, or a 100 km stage actually, and he just did the entire stage on his own, and he just won it. That's at this point I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this Hugh Carthy kind of guy. I think he had like top 10 on the, no, he was 11th on the Giro. Yeah, he was 11th on the Giro. But prior to like that stage on the Tour de Suisse, he hadn't done a lot of things, in my opinion. He had an average Tour de France this year. I just learned that he actually did it. But yeah, I hadn't expected him to be at this level on the Vuelta. And with Martinez and Woods leaving, I think he's the second leader of EF behind Rigoberto Urán and ahead of riders such as like TJ Van Garderen, who was on this Vuelta, for those who didn't know. But I don't blame you for not knowing.
Free TJ.
TJ in yellow.
No, he was anonymous. I think that's fair to say. What's happened to TJ? Someone please help us out. But anyway, Hugh Carthy has such a strong performance, like you say. 25 seconds down in the TT. He was fourth place in the TT. And one thing I think that we can definitely take from this race is that he's a 3-week racer. He can ride through the 3 weeks, get stronger with every stage, and really he won't fade throughout the 3 weeks. Very much like Carapaz, I think, has proved on multiple occasions. So I'm completely with you right there. Hugh Carthy is definitely going to get a leading role at Grand Tour. Can he get another podium? I think it's going to be a big ask for him to win a Grand Tour, although he was very, very close this year. But yeah, first podium, it would be great to see him on there again.
It's a big ask for him to get another podium, but I think he can do it. He will need a lot of things going his way, but I think he might have what it takes. Then in fourth place, we've got Dan Martin. He likes the Vuelta. He often top 10s the Vuelta. I expected him to finish along those lines, maybe a bit below. So it's actually a nice performance from the Irish rider. Enric Mas in fifth. I'm a bit disappointed. I won't lie. He was my third place when the Vuelta started. I will, however, mention Wout Poels. He's done it again. He just loves the sixth place on the Vuelta. He had done it, I think, in 2018 or 2017. No, it was 2017, I think. He's just done it again. And as the leading rider of Bahrain, a Bahrain team that did well on the Giro with Pello Bilbao, that did well on the Tour de France with Mikel Landa, this team is just always there. And you love to see it.
You certainly do. I mean, they have a strong team because I think Poels hasn't quite shown his previous form earlier this year and perhaps last year too, but really showing himself to be a strong GC rider again at this year's Vuelta, where he has shown he can really still lead a Grand Tour rather than acting as a domestique as he did for so long at Team Sky. But yeah, like you say, Bahrain McLaren, I think they're becoming Bahrain victorious, if I'm not mistaken, next year. But anyhow, they have some very strong riders who seem to be improving with age. Bilbao, Caruso, let's not forget him. He was very good at the Tour de France with Mikel Landa. This team are really developing into a strong Grand Tour contending team. Okay, so I think we're going to round up this pod pretty soon. One last question before we do so. Guillaume, who was your surprise in a positive sense, your real surprise package of the race, as well as your disappointment of this year's Vuelta a España?
I'll start with my disappointment. My disappointment was Chris Froome. I've mentioned and talked about him a lot already on this podcast, so you probably already know the answers. My surprise rider is going to be a Belgian. He has a wonderful first name. He also is 24 years old. It's Kobe Goossens. I might be butchering his last name, but you talked about Bruno Armirail being always in the top 50. I think the worst position that Goossens has had is 65 on today's stage, but the rest of the time he was I think always in the top 50. He had a 53rd position. He finishes in the top 25 of the GC in a Lotto Soudal team which had no intentions whatsoever GC-wise. They got their stage win with Team Wellens, and I think he's done himself proud. There's a nice contingent of youngsters in the Lotto Soudal team, the likes of Harm van Hoeken, which we saw on the Giro, and Kobe Goossens on this Vuelta. Lotto Soudal has some nice prospects, and the Belgian will be my surprise of this year's edition of La Vuelta. I will return the question. Joe, who was your main surprise and your main disappointment of this year's Vuelta?
I'm going to go for two riders who were next to each other in the GC, actually. The rider I was most impressed with on the Vuelta was Bruno Armorai. Have to go with him after how much I was bigging him up earlier in the podcast. Really consistent performance despite acting in a pure domestique role throughout much of the race. Very consistent over all terrains. I'm really excited to see what this guy can do going forward. If not him, I would have maybe said Rob Stannard, who impressed me very much throughout the race. Anyhow, on to my disappointment. I'm going to go with Esteban Chaves. He finished 27th in the GC. He looked very promising at the start of the race. I think he was right there with the lead guys on the first stage. And it seems that Chaves would again be putting together a real GC charge in a Grand Tour like he did on the Giro now a few years ago. But he faded so much. He faded so much throughout the race. After looking so promising, looking at the results now, he was 4th place on stage 1. And on stage 17, the final GC day, he finished 116th, just dropping straight out of the GC battle. Chaves, now 30 years old, we all love him. He doesn't stop smiling. It would be nice to see him put together a 3-week performance again. Whether it's going to happen or not, though, I'm not too sure. Okay then, guys, I think we've wrapped up everything pretty much we hope to touch on the Vuelta. Maybe it's gone on slightly longer than we'd hoped, but anyhow, really hope you've enjoyed the inaugural Ascent cycling podcast with myself and Guillaume. Hopefully, if you did, make sure you hit the follow, subscribe buttons as well. You can find me personally on Twitter at Tim Zosky, as well as on YouTube. Guillaume, where can the guys find you?
You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Blackwall. You can also find me on Twitter at KBlackwall and on Instagram. As Joe said, we do hope you've enjoyed this inaugural podcast of the Ascent channel. Joe, final word?
Keep on smiling, Esteban.
Goodbye.